What's up, you guys? Tori Wilson here, and welcome to the Wrestling Connection with Chris and Glenn. Now listen, in a world where it's kind of easy these days to be divided, we can definitely all come together for the love of wrestling, and that's exactly what Chris and Glenn intend to do. I cannot be responsible for anything they say that might piss you off or be wrong or right. I'll be stepping out of that arena, but thank you for joining them. And Chris, I do know that you still got that schoolgirl crush on me, and it's cool to admit, okay? Listen up, guys, and listen good. Cheers.
I just need a little space to call my own. Just a corner of the world where I can be alone with you.
Welcome, ladies and gents, to another episode of the Wrestling Connection podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this fine day, ladies and gents. It's time for episode 27, and Written in the Stars. That was a theme song. Written in the Stars by Tiny Temper was the theme song of WrestleMania 27 back in 2011. Glenn, live from the Glen Den. What are your favourite memories of WrestleMania 27?
I like The Rock's promo. I like Edge and Del Rio. And I like, my favourite moment in WrestleMania 27 was when The Rock and Austin crossed paths backstage. That's a goosebump. That is the only goosebumps moment from that entire show, because what I loved about that is because obviously it was 10 years after their great WrestleMania 17 clash. It was the first time they'd crossed paths into TV in years and years. Yeah. And which was, everyone was hoping it would happen in some capacity because they've been coming back and they've both been on TV to build up to certain matches and stuff. So that was awesome. It's one of the last great Mae Young cameos as well. In that segment,
the Mae Young one was good, yeah.
Yeah, so like basically that's it. My favorite things in that show are all the non-wrestling stuff. So like we've spoken about this, man. It's a bit of a dud of a show, isn't it?
It is. I don't like it at all. It is. I remember the buzz for it being so good because that Rock return was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I remember like it was one of the few times that I've really like been crying watching wrestling, watching that Rock return. And then just all the stuff, the promo and stuff was really cool. It just went on forever. Edge and Del Rio was really good. Orton catching CM Punk in the flying RKO is really cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good match. Cody Rhodes and Rey Mysterio isn't a bad match either. Triple H and Undertaker is a good match.
Yep. Not the
but
best,
it's
good.
Yeah, it's very overrated in my opinion. People say it's one of the greatest ever, and it doesn't hold a candle to 25, 26, or indeed End of an Era at 28. But it's a fun wrestling. It also has Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler wrestling for about 3 hours. So there you go.
Yeah, and the only good thing about that match is Austin nearly running over Jack Swagger.
That's right. I remember that. It was so close.
Yeah.
That's right. And he stuns Booker T, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Anyway, there you go, ladies and gents. That will do it for this week. Thanks for listening. No, this is an episode that I have been dying to do for ages. I don't know about you, but on Twitter and Instagram and that sort of thing, I always see this question about Mount Rushmores in WWE and about and pro wrestling in general.
Yeah.
And we've kind of touched on this before. If someone asked me, who is your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling, I'd need to say, what do you mean? Like, what category are you talking about? Are you meaning who's the best wrestler? Who's the biggest superstars? Who are the best this? Who are the best that? It's much like, watching a certain documentary, or if you're in a certain mood to listen to a certain song, you need to be, it needs to be defined categories, certain genres. And it probably doesn't really matter to many people, and to most people really. But to people like us, we're a bit kind of like, I can't answer that question with a straight answer. Do you feel like that as well?
Yeah, we have spoken about this. Anytime anyone asks me that, I'm like, well, I have many sub-questions to return to you before I can give you an answer. I mean, I guess we all maybe have our kind of gun to our head favorite wrestler. You'd probably say Taker. I would say Austin, I guess.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I feel uncomfortable just leaving it like that because you feel like you're neglecting so much other stuff, especially, and that's why I like this idea of having kind of categories of Rushmore. So it'll be interesting to see how much of this we actually get through, and how much commonality we have. I thought that'd be quite cool to see.
Totally. Well, we have decided to go with 6 different categories. 4 of them are kind of like the ones you would always go for. And the two other ones that we kind of decided last minute are a bit kind of daft and a bit more fun because we're trying to keep this a bit light-hearted here in the hard times that we're going through here in the world. We're going to talk about the Mount Rushmores of general managers, authority figures, that sort of thing. And also my favourite one, the Mount Rushmores of wrestling referees. So, because we kind of touched on this a couple of weeks ago, I think one of your thankful segments was the ref bump.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the invasion match between Errol Hebner and Nick Patrick. And when I was editing that episode, I went onto YouTube and I watched the match, and it is amazing.
It's so
Do you remember the part in the match when all the referees are brawling on the outside and Jack Doan runs and just like knocks off Brian Hebner's head with a clothesline?
I love it. It's just, this is wrestling. Like there are like
This is wrestling.
It is. It bloody well is, and I say that not with a hint of irony because listen,
Absolutely.
each to their own. If you're the kind of wrestling fan that just loves the kind of the straight wrestling, like the New Japan Tokyo Dome 5-star stuff, like if you're really just into the technical wrestling and that's clearly not for you, that's fine. The beauty of wrestling is that it's such a variety show. There's something for everyone, especially because there is so much wrestling. But for me, if you can put something out there that gets an incredible reaction that the fans are into, you're winning. That's 5 stars. And in my estimation, that's 5 stars. To my success criteria, not to be too much of a teacher, that's 5 stars because the crowd are mad for it. It's so nuclear. I love it. And the WWE would love that nowadays. Well, they'd love any crowd reaction, but you know what I mean? Like
you say,
in general.
Yeah, exactly. I know, but I think the quote you said when we talked about this match before was that this match, the referee match, was more over with the crowd than Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 34. And you're absolutely right.
Like, and that's not to take anything away from the amazing first Roman and Brock WrestleMania match, but that New Orleans one was such a dud for me. I had such high hopes because they had such a scorcher the first time around. But yeah, the referee match is moreover. It has to be said. You just need to watch and hear the crowd to hear the difference.
In terms of the Mount Rushmore of wrestling referees, right, I think the first 3 are so obvious. And the fourth one, I couldn't figure it out. I was like, who is the fourth one? I can't pick a fourth one. And I actually felt that with a lot of these categories.
Yeah.
A couple of them are really, really easy, and then I couldn't figure out the last one, you know?
Yeah, I'm the same. There's quite a few where I'll send a picture at some point in my notes. There's been quite a few names that have been squished out, and often it is like I've changed my mind and dithered on that fourth one. So I look forward to us jumping into it. I look forward to hearing, especially that the difficult fourth pick for every Rushmore is a tough one, and that's where you might get some interesting responses. I think.
Glenn, before you say anything else, I just want to stop you. I just want to. We forgot to introduce, or not introduce. We thought to thank the person who introduced the podcast this week. Can you believe we were able to get this particular person, this ruthless aggression superstar, to introduce our show this week?
Why? Now, who was it again, Chris?
It was one of my favourites of all time. It was Miss Tori Wilson. What a gem. No, seriously though, Tori Wilson was like someone that was consistently every single week on television from 2001 to 2007. Right, and I don't care what you say about her wrestling talent or the reason that she was on TV or the only reason she got hired and all this stuff. I do not care. She was a megastar. She was super over. She was on TV every single week, and she made a lasting impression, not only on me, but so many people, you know, and regardless of age or gender or interest or fandom or whatever, you know. So that is why when we get people like her and people like, you know, like Mick Foley, like really big names and stuff, it still kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And, you know, for me, Tori Wilson, I think, obviously, she went into the Hall of Fame this past year, 2019, I should say, and deservingly so. And it was such an awesome moment to see her receive that accolade and being inducted by Stacey Keibler. I mean, who else could have done it?
God, I know.
It was amazing. But, you know, Tori, her time in WWE is what I know best, and it's, you know, defined as a transitional era in women's wrestling, kind of symbolized, I suppose, by Trish and how Trish went from being the kind of typical Attitude Era eye candy to being credible wrestler, right? And but I also think Tori had that path as well. And I know people don't talk about her as a wrestler so much, but you know, when I think back to like her Dawn Marie feud, which I love,
yes, so much fun.
Yeah, it's just a great soap opera story. And rest in peace to Al Wilson in real life. I know he passed away in the storyline 18 years ago, but in real life, he passed away only last
Yeah,
year.
he did.
And you could tell it meant a lot to Tori to talk about him and her Hall of Fame induction
He
speech.
died like 2 days before the speech.
I mean, that's incredible that she was able to do that,
Yeah.
and so, I think, hats off to Al Wilson, because here he was briefly in the WWE, and here we are still talking about that storyline.
Yeah.
And it was just great soap opera, and I also enjoyed the wrestling. No Mercy 2002 was unique because there were 2 women's singles matches,
Mhm.
and in 2002 that simply didn't happen. You had the women's championship match, which I think was Trish and maybe Jazz. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
they had loads of matches during that time.
exactly, and then you had a grudge match from SmackDown, and that was Dawn and Tori, and I think, considering neither of them are known really as wrestlers, they did really well, and I enjoy that feud so fondly. I mean, I enjoy Funaki asking Al Wilson, I have one question: what were you doing in the shower with your clothes on?
Oh, classic.
But I'm and I got to see her live at Rebellion. She was in a tag match. Yeah, I just nothing but good things to say about her, and it was just really cool to have that message come through to say that she'd recorded it and sent it to us.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tori. It's a real honor.
I remember, was it Royal Rumble 2003? They also have a match, Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson. And I just remember thinking, even like recently when I kind of went back to watch, or the last time I watched Royal Rumble 3 anyway, like the Royal Rumble was such a busy pay-per-view anyway. Like they struggled to get matches because obviously the Rumble match is so long, and you need to get the titles on there, then storylines leading into WrestleMania. But because that feud was on TV every week, as I say, and that doesn't, I mean, what storylines in WWE recently have been on TV consistently for 6 months every week? It feels like the main ones, the same thing. I mean, Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre wrestling 3 pay-per-views in a row can get kind of repetitive, even though both guys are so great. But still, that's one of the few ones that's on TV every single week. And because of that, they benefit from that to the point where at the Royal Rumble, when there's title matches and WrestleMania feuds and everything, we still had to put Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson on there, not just to fill time, but because they were on TV every week, they were getting, good ratings. It just shows you, it's not just, for one thing. She was a big star, and I'm very, very honoured, and made me kind of blush. And you threw me under the bus a little bit with that introduction, by the way, by giving us some inside information. But I trusted you with that, and then you went and exploited it, didn't I?
Don't think I think it's hardly the first time she's ever heard something like that. So,
exactly. I wonder how many times she gets that. So there you go. But yeah, really, really cool. Thank you so much to the one and only Tori Wilson. And I watched her Hall of Fame speech right after she sent the video in, and it was amazing. And I can't recommend it enough. It was actually hilarious because she's always making jokes, and it's inspiring. It's full of wisdom and proving that you it's not just, you're not just a one-dimensional person. Like if you have a dream and you have a goal, you can go out and accomplish it. And I just think she did such a good job. And I'm assuming she was really emotional, and there was loads of pressure on her and stuff. And there was many people saying that she doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, as if that is even a thing,
Stuff them, get it right. And honestly, I mean, if that's you as a wrestling fan, then maybe I genuinely don't think the WWE is for you. If you're going to get that precious about a rigged sport and their Hall of Fame, like Tori Wilson is. The fact that we're still talking about her nearly 20 years later, of course she's deserving to be in the Hall of Fame.
Just like Roman Reigns doesn't deserve to be the world champion, by the way. Just so there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit different, but you get what I mean. Anyway, thank you so much, Tori.
Sucks.
What?
Cena sucks.
Anyway,
should we catch up on how things have been this week first, or what?
Well, how are things with you then? How is he settling into the man cave, the Glendon?
Man, it's going well. So we now have installed the final piece of the puzzle that we need in this house. So it was an uphill battle, Chris. Like we needed to get the kind of satellite dish fixed so we could have telly. We needed to get, because of the layout of the rooms, we needed to get like the piano professionally moved from our flat to our house and get the telly mounted above that. And we've never had the telly mounted. We needed to get all manner of jobs done. We needed somebody to come in and fix the windows because one of the windows broke. We had a wasp's nest that somebody had to come and clear out. So we've had so many people, coming into our house. Can I just say that's, as at time of recording, that was perfectly legal as long as you are masked and distance and stuff, and you keep the place ventilated. Just throwing that out there. We were not reckless with that. And then we had to get the internet installed. One of the last things was getting the bloody washing machine so that we can wash our clothes, because we've been offloading our laundry to like parents and stuff. And my pal Robert is across the road from me now, so he's actually managed to escape being asked to take a load. But maybe by the time this goes out, I'll have begged for him to wash some of my clothes. But yeah, so it's been a mad old week, but the most crazy thing about living here in the Glendon happened to me a few nights ago. Can I tell you this mental story? It's not wrestling related, but it was just absolutely one of those weird mental coincidences that happened to me when I was.
No, please. I love a Glenn story.
So I was a couple nights ago. I was out with Luna, my dog. And outside our house, there's this lovely kind of big kind of field of grass, and so it's perfect just to nip out with Luna. Even though we've got a back garden now, Luna doesn't like to go to the toilet in the back garden now because she sees it as her own space, and dogs don't like going in their own space. So you kind of need to take her out the front. But it's lovely because it's a nice big field right in front of the house. It's not a field, but it's a big patch of grass, right? Perfect for like playing a quick game of five-a-side or whatever. So we're out with Luna, and there's this guy who's there with his wee girl, and the wee girl's maybe about, I don't know, she's maybe about 3 or 4 or something, right? And the wee girl comes up to me and she goes, "What's your name?" And I genuinely thought she was talking about Luna. So I went, "Well, this is Luna," because I thought, this happened before. Wee kids come up to the dog, want to say hi to the dog, and then the wee girl goes, "No, what is your name?" I went, "Oh, and so I'm kind of looking at the dad now, and I'm like thinking, is this all right? And like, "Oh, I'm Glenn." And she went, "Nice to meet you, Glenn." So like, you're the most polite wee girl I've ever met, so that's nice. And so then me and the guy just started talking, like arbitrary kind of neighborhood chat, like new to the neighborhood, what's this weather like, that kind of stuff. Very airy-fairy, very light, very cordial, very pleasant, but nothing too deep. And then he turns around and he goes, "Sorry if this sounds weird, but I think I know you." I went, "Oh, really?"
All right.
And he goes, "Are you Glenn?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "This is going to sound weird, but did you recently leave this school?" And so he named the school that I worked at until March or April of this year.
Right.
And I went, yeah, and I now work at a new school. And he goes, "Well, I was the guy that got hired as your replacement, and I live 2 doors down from you."
No way.
I know,
really?
Absolutely mind-blowing. So this lovely man is not only an English teacher, but he was, after I left my old school, they opened up the vacancy for my replacement, and he was the guy that got hired. And he's 2 doors down from me.
And you've went and moved into this random house
that
you could have moved into any house.
And I've never met this guy before. I didn't even know his name. And I think he must have seen me like in a mutual friend's like an Instagram picture or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I think that, or maybe there might still be pictures of me somewhere in the school. I don't know, but so and then we just had this big conversation about teaching in this climate, mutual colleagues and mutual friends. And then I realized, actually, do you know what, mate? I've got some old marking that I forgot to return to the school, and maybe I'll just put it for your letterbox. But I just, that way they say, like, my jaw hit the floor, or you can't shut your mouth because you're so shocked. That always seems like a bit of an exaggeration, but that was I genuinely couldn't shut my mouth. I was so shocked that this guy who's replaced me, and he's teaching my old classroom.
Jesus.
And that's the other thing. I had to apologize, because that classroom I left in a state, only because we had to leave the school in such a hurry, with COVID, and I never got to go back after the school shut. So, well, not for any great length of time, that is. So, yeah, it was just one of those bizarre coincidences. I couldn't believe it. Absolutely couldn't believe it. I was kind of hoping, though, he was going to go, "Are you Glenn from the Wrestling Connection?"
Do you know what? That's what I thought you were going to say.
I was hoping for it, but it's not happened. Maybe one day.
No, I know. It's happened to me a couple of times in terms of YouTube, but it's never been like for Wrestling Connection. But hopefully that's what we're going to. That's why anybody listening needs to share the podcast with a pal, so we can have that moment. So Glenn can be out walking Luna, and there'll be a nice man come over and say, "You talk me to sleep."
Yeah, I've forgotten that you've been recognised a couple of times at wrestling shows because of your YouTube channel, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, a guy I used to go to school with, I've told you, I think I've said this in the podcast before, but like someone I used to go to school with, I met at a rugby club one night and was like, "Chris, you talk me to sleep at night." And I was like, "Oh, I've not seen you in 5 years, which is weird. There was a couple
That's
of times
weird.
when I was actually at like a wrestling show where like people have said hello and been like, "Oh, I'd watched your videos and stuff." There was a wee boy outside the Hydro, I think for TNA in 2015. I was there with my mate Paul, and we were standing outside the Hydro and we're in the queue. And a wee boy, he could have been like 6 or 7 years old, must have been. No, maybe a bit old on that. Maybe 8 or 9, but it was really, really small and kind of had glasses and really, really small. Like you could pure tell that he was so young.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, I love your videos." Like I didn't even say hello, just said that. Like, "Oh, I love your videos."
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of funny. And then the best one was when we were at. I'm sorry, I'm just putting myself over here, other than you. Your great story. But I remember we were at SmackDown at the Braehead Arena in 2012, and we had really, really, really high up seats, like real top level cheap seats, right? And we were sitting there, and someone walked in, and I think I'd spoke to him maybe at the signing earlier that day, or I mean, I don't know if even the signing was the Sheamus signing. That's right. I saw him at the Sheamus signing, I think. And he comes in and he sees us, and I recognised him, and I gave him a wee wave. And he kind of looked up and he started shouting, "CM! CM! CM!" With that, like, obviously, because my YouTube is CM42TV, and obviously that's my initials. And he's just going, "CM," just in the middle of the Braehead Arena in front of the crowd. So I was just in the top tier being like, "Ah, yes, that's me. Thank you for being a fan. You want an autograph?"
It must be a nice
I didn't sign an autograph. Don't be daft. But yeah, that's happened a couple of times. But it's always funny. So I'm waiting for that moment when you're walking the dog, because you feel all giddy when it happens to you.
I know, it'll be a hell of an ego boost, but
I know.
we maybe need to have a few more listeners before that ever happens.
I know. I love that, by the way. See if you've got any like daft stories that have happened when you've been out walking the dog or something. It doesn't matter if it's not wrestling related. You got to bring it to the table. You got to bring it to the table.
Yep, you consider it.
Tell
don't you worry.
all of our friends and family who listen that you can tell them what's been going on in their lives.
Yeah, saves me having the phone.
Exactly. I don't expect. I hate being on the phone. Anyway, let's do some Mount Rushmore chat then for a little bit. So we were talking about the Mount Rushmores of wrestling and how we have all these fun scenarios and all these fun categories and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that we're kind of talking about at the start, obviously, we just say who is the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. To me, I think that comes down to who has been like the biggest stars, who has drawn the most money, who has done the best for business, who has pulled in the most attendance, broken the most records, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, there is a correct answer for it, for the 4 names. Obviously, all other ones can be subjective and like a sort of, who are your favourites. But I think in terms of the fact of who are the 4 biggest superstars of all time, I think is the 4 I've written down. I don't know about you, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, although I think there's a good chance we have the same 4, but there's one name in this who is definitely deserving, but could be subbed out for another name so there's one name. There's 2 people who I'm torn between, but I've settled on one of them. But I'll tell you who that is when we start to go through the actual list. So this is for male superstars, I take it.
Yeah, well, just male superstars, yes, but I just mean biggest stars ever. Like if a female could have fit into this category, that would have been fine, But mm-hmm. I think that the 4 people who are on this list are 4 males,
mm-hmm.
and I'll run through my one then. I think it is, of course, Hulk Hogan,
mm-hmm.
The Rock,
yep,
Stone Cold Steve Austin,
mm-hmm.
and John Cena. That's the correct answer for this category.
So I also have Hulk Hogan, The Rock, John Cena, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. However, let me explain. I nearly didn't have Cena on my list, only because I'm not sure who was bigger in their time, John Cena in his time or Bruno Sammartino in his. Because Sammartino carried that company and he sold out the Garden for years and years and years, and he was the big superstar before Hulk Hogan. Sammartino was a mainstream star, and that's whenever I do this, whenever I think about this, that's the one that I have there's no question about Austin and Rock, even though they were the same era. They were both equally a huge draw, and The Rock has then gone on to transcend the business. Hogan is a pop culture icon. He is synonymous with the 1980s. He's not just a wrestling star, he is an 80s star. Cena is also a huge star, and the company probably wouldn't be as profitable now as it is had they not rode the wave of Cena and Cena merch and all of that stuff. And whether you love him or you hate him, like, he always got a reaction. I also just don't know enough about the San Martino era to be confident.
Yeah, exactly.
But his importance just can't be understated, because it wasn't just the fact that he was the WWF champion for a long time, or he was the top guy in the WWF and then the WWF, but he was a huge nationwide star. He could travel the territories. Like, he was a big name, so that's where I dither. I've settled on those four, the same as you, but Cena for me will always have an asterisk, because even though he's himself now transcending the wrestling industry, San Martino to me is very deserving to be on that list too.
Okay, good shout. My argument towards it is San Martino transcended the WWF, right? Which was back in the day when he was champion, was a territory-based business. So the WWF didn't run Georgia and didn't run Carolina and didn't run Canada. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In Cena's time, Cena sold out everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, Cena was able to sell out Georgia and Carolina and Carolina and all those places. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think Cena does take one step further than San Martino. San Martino might have drawn more money, technically, but how much San Martino merch was there? And also how accessible was the WWF on television? When San Martino was there in the 70s. Whereas Cena, anytime Cena's on the show now, even 10 years after his prime or whatever, will still pop a massive rating. And the reason the rating stayed at 4s and 5s and 3.5s from 2005 to 2010, I think Cena's a large part of that.
Yeah.
Even though I do think Cena didn't quite reach his full maturation period till after 2010, when he became a legit sort of veteran, to the point where he's wrestling Kevin Owens and AJ Styles and stuff as the veteran, not just as John Cena. So, and then of course social media and all that stuff. I think social media is going to play a big part in that as well. Cena's going to transcend that. But I totally agree. I mean, San Martino, it belongs on that list. But again, I don't know as much about San Martino as John Cena. Of course I don't. I'm only 23 years of age, but you look back at the historical aspect of that and you see the amount of times he sold out Madison Square Garden, a place where no one sold out, and San Martino did that and of course was champion for 4 years. I don't know, I think Cena might take it for me. As you say, Hogan's an 80s icon. I'm watching that Netflix show Glow just now, about the women's wrestling, and the first episode, the actor Ruth Wilder shows up to her audition. Little does she know it's a wrestling audition. And the guy says, okay, it's a wrestling show. And they all go, what, like Hulk Hogan?
Yeah.
Like, everybody knew who Hulk Hogan was, In the late 90s, everybody knew who The Rock was and everybody knew who Stone Cold was. But I'd almost argue, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'd argue that The Rock has become a bigger star than all of them.
Yeah, definitely.
You wouldn't, at the time, you would think that Austin was just a wee nudge above The Rock, and that annoyed The Rock. But now it's like, everybody knows The Rock. But if you've ever been a wrestling fan, you know Austin. But like, every wrestling fan's wife, dad, uncle, grandma, all these people, everyone knows The Rock, So I think that's my argument for those four, but I think San Martino's got a good shout. I think Ric Flair has a shout too.
Yeah.
I think Shawn Michaels has a shout. I think Bret Hart has a shout. But I think these four are your pick.
I do think so. One name that I also want to bring up, who I think actually, in fairness, probably should be equal to San Martino in terms of potentially knocking Cena out of Rushmore. And I'd be interested in your thoughts, but I'm pretty confident with this one. El Santo out of Mexico.
Oh yeah, good shout.
Because, I mean, if you want to talk about pop culture icons, in Mexico and like a lot of Spanish-speaking countries, he you can't. I don't think I can adequately express just how important a cultural figure he was, and he transcended wrestling. He had his own movies. He was on talk shows.
Yeah.
He was, I don't know if he ever got a state funeral when he died, but he bloody well deserved one in Mexico because he was huge. And he only ever amassed once when he was very old and near death, and on television he briefly lifted his mask just out of the blue and showed his face briefly. He was buried in his mask, as far as I'm aware. And, you read Eddie Guerrero's book and he talks a lot about El Santo and how he would wear his mask to the shower after the shows.
Wow.
And so his identity was so, like, we know who he was, like, we know his identity, but it was so protected then. And he was just a huge Mexican star. And I think he was bigger in Mexico than San Martino was in America. And I think in Mexico, he parallels Hogan in terms of pop culture
Absolutely.
significance. And that's why I still don't think he maybe gets on my Rushmore, but I think he's closer in my Rushmore than Flair or Brett or Shawn.
Okay.
For that reason.
Only I totally agree as well. Only argument towards that is everybody in Mexico knew El Santo, but everybody in Mexico and all over the world knows John Cena. You know what I mean? And knows other people like that. But I mean, in terms of pop culture, El Santo's a good shout. You want to talk about international countries? What about Japan? Antonio Inoki was a massive star. But he probably reached that El Santo level. But again, I just couldn't, like, you can't ask someone's auntie, tell me who El Santo is or who Antonio Inoki is, but they can probably tell you who The Rock is, and John Cena and stuff. I think Undertaker's a good shout too, not just because he's my favourite wrestler of all time, but I do think non-wrestling fans, young and old, know The Undertaker. You know what I mean? But this is good. This is a good, more interesting discussion than our usual tomfoolery. You can't do a Mount Rushmore and then consider these people the greatest wrestlers of all time, because I think Austin's a great wrestler, and I think John Cena's an incredibly underrated wrestler. And psychology-wise, I think Hogan doesn't get anywhere near enough credit of a wrestler he is, and The Rock is an amazing athlete, But you can't look at those four and say, oh, they're the four best wrestlers of all time, you know? If you're going to talk the Mount Rushmore of in-ring performers of all time, you don't need to worry about box office and ratings and merchandise and stuff. Just bell to bell. And I'm not just talking technical. I mean everything. Bell to bell, action, psychology, selling, timing, pacing, all that stuff. Who would you put on your Mount Rushmore for the best in-ring performers of all time?
Okay. Well, I've got three confident ones, and then again, I have a fourth position which had somebody slashed and somebody then added, and there's still a bit of dithering. And I don't know how much of that is me being objective and me kind of just putting people that I like in. So in my Mount Rushmore of in-ring, and I think there's a good chance we might have a bit of difference here, but I have Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels, AJ Styles, and then I originally had Ric Flair, but I swapped him out for Bret Hart.
I have Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, Bret Hart, and Daniel Bryan.
Wow, I was so close to putting Bryan in as well, because I felt like it would have been that he was up against AJ, in my view.
Yeah, if I was to take one out, I would take Bryan out of there. I could replace him with Flair. But again, I'm talking taste as well here, because Flair was before my time. I love watching Flair matches, but Steamboat and Flair in the late 80s would have blown my mind, but I wasn't there for it. You know what I mean? So I can't put Flair in mine, but I'd also argue Randy Orton.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's also criminally underrated in the ring. Randy Orton is probably one of the best guys on the roster right now for psychology, like his pacing. And if you ever, and he that match with Edge at Backlash proved that he can have the
he can do anything.
He can do anything, and this is it. And I think people realize that he has the kind of Triple H kind of slow, less is more kind of approach, doesn't he?
I mean, you could argue Triple H could be on this list too, but I think he'd be quite far down. Like, you could maybe make a top 10, but in terms of psychology and in-ring bell to bell, I think he's a good shout too, and I think Owen Hart would be a good one as well, and Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, and even Chris Jericho. But I think the Shawn, Angle, and Brett, I think, are the three obvious ones, and then you can throw in a preference here and there. And I do think Daniel Bryan's one of the best wrestlers that's ever lived. In terms of being consistently the best wrestler since 2005. Yeah. You know what I mean? And even now, in a sort of limited role, he's having limited amount of matches every year. Still a highlight of a show in terms of the in-ring match. He had the match against AJ Styles on SmackDown for the Intercontinental title. 45 minutes on SmackDown doesn't happen very often, when it does happen, you put AJ and Brian in there, you're going to get a special match, and you did.
Yeah.
And then you were talking about Randy Orton wrestling anybody. Daniel Bryan can wrestle anybody and have a great match, and I think that's the criteria here. So can Bret Hart, so can Shawn Michaels, and so can Kurt Angle. But I don't know.
That's a good shout, man. Like, Daniel Bryan is consistent, and the whole Bryan and AJ thing, like, I know neither of them are young men anymore, but like,
Exactly.
That as long as they're fit and healthy, they can always go to the well for that one. And it's the kind of thing is that you can put on SmackDown, and it'll be the most memorable episode of SmackDown for a long time, like they did a few months ago. But you could also, do a main event program for pay-per-view with those two guys as well, and it would be amazing. So and they can flip roles, they can flip from face to heel or do heel face, and they would still make it work.
Absolutely. But this isn't a list and an idea and a topic that limits just to the male gender, ladies and gents. We had to make sure we included the female list, who is the female wrestling Mount Rushmore. And this one's a bit tricky, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think the biggest stars that there's been, that have been women, haven't been the best wrestlers. So, I mean, you can look at the Mount Rushmore of guys as well, like Hogan and stuff. But I've been thinking about how certain performers have changed the way that women's wrestling is perceived. Conceived, Christ.
Jesus.
And I think that's very, very important, and I think that's something that should definitely establish a spot on the Mount Rushmore for the fact that you've not only changed the way women's wrestling's looked at, but changed the way it has respected. And it has been changed by a certain number of performers from a joke and a part of the show to now a main part of the show. You know what I mean? I think that deserves spot on the Rushmore, even though the two names that I've got on mine might not be as big of a star as people I may have left off. So the people I've left off who would probably be bigger stars would be Chyna, Sable, Mae Young, the Moolah, all those guys, and Stacey Keibler, because she was always a favourite of mine. Mm-hmm. But the four I've picked, I think, are the ones that have done the most for the actual division and the actual genre of women's wrestling. And my picks are Trish, Lita, Charlotte, and Becky Lynch.
We're very close.
Oh, God.
So it is tricky, this one. So I've got Trish, Lita, Becky, and Chyna. And Charlotte would be the closest omission, the person who's closest to being on it. But it's difficult because culturally speaking, Sable and Sunny were so important.
Sunny, that's the other one I was meant to say. Yeah, Sunny too. Sunny was a huge star.
He's a big star. Not much of a wrestler, but a big star. And same goes for Sable.
Did Sunny ever have a match?
Sunny did wrestle once or twice.
Okay. She probably wrestled in Smoky Mountain because she was with Chris Candido, wasn't she? So I think she might have wrestled in Smoky Mountain, but in terms of WWE, I don't remember her having a match.
Yeah, sorry. Let's just I just need to pause for a second. I need to reply to my brother here. Sorry.
Is he like, where are you? I need access to the Glendon.
Oh, he wants my Now TV login.
Oh,
yeah, so it is difficult because, I actually think that in 10 years' time, this list might look totally different. Trish and Lita are of the same era. I think Trish deserves to be on there because of her longevity and her consistency. But I still think that Lita was a bigger star in her prime. Like, she was more over, and that's and for the character work and her versatility, because she had a great face run, but also a good heel run.
On a time where the show considered or consisted of The Rock and Austin, Undertaker and Jericho and Mick Foley and all these completely over wrestlers, the top three biggest reactions every show was Rock, Austin, and Lita.
And this is it. And that's what a lot of people forget when they talk about the comparing Trish and Lita, is that, yes, Trish was around in the Attitude Era in 2000 and 2001, but it wasn't really until 2002 onwards that she started to be taken seriously as a wrestler, really.
Absolutely.
Because she was still up against it. She was still being Vince McMahon's puppy dog, and none of that is her fault. Like, she was put into those situations, but Trish
And done a
didn't.
good job. You know what I mean?
Trish didn't really, yeah, she did, but Trish didn't earn her or didn't get the chance to earn her position on Mount Rushmore until much later, like until 2002, 2003 onwards. Her prime is like 03 to 06, I think, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas Trish, Lita was over a bit earlier. Chyna was just like, Chyna is the closest WWF could have got to having a female world champion in the men's
Yeah.
division. I kind of wish they'd done it, and they never did. But they could have done it, and it would have been totally credible, even in that era, which was a lot more misogynistic. I'll just go out and say it, and a lot more sexist in media in general, not just in wrestling, but in media.
Absolutely.
But she would have been taken a bit more seriously at that time, and I think it'll happen one day. I think the WWE will allow that to happen one day, but you know, you've got Charlotte, and it seems unfair to have Becky in there, but not Charlotte. But Becky has just, you know, blown up as this star who, and I think, you know, up until when she went off for maternity, she was the biggest star on the roster. Now I would say it's Roman, but she was the biggest star in the entire roster, not just the women's division, but the entire roster. And I don't think Charlotte's ever had that.
No, I think the reason Becky made my list is because she, much like Trish and Lita, everybody liked her. Like, there was no demographic that didn't like Becky Lynch. You know what I mean? Like kids, old guys, married couples. You know, everybody loved Becky Lynch because she's just cool. You know, and she transcends the roster just now, or did anyway when she was there.
Yeah.
And she could do everything. She could talk, and she was a great character, and she's a great wrestler. And yeah, I think Becky deserves to be on that list because of the work she's done for women's wrestling in general. And then Charlotte, being the best performer all round in the women's division ever since she debuted, pretty much. And then, of course, having her big lineage and stuff helps because that's going to be her like reputation. You know, there's no way you can get around that. You know, it's like The Rock's daughter. You know, she's going to be this great star. You know, she is, but everybody's going to look at her as The Rock's daughter. And I think Charlotte has done an amazing job of establishing herself. You know what I mean? And I think that belongs on the list because of that. You know, so yeah, those are mine. Tag teams. Who, in your opinion, are the Mount Rushmore of tag team wrestling?
So the first three I was fairly confident with. I put Hardys, Dudleys, and Road Warriors. The last one I dithered, and I settled on the Young Bucks.
Really?
I'll tell you why.
Holy moly.
Listen, I know there's like Edge and Christian and the Rock and Roll Express and the Von Erichs and the Fabulous Freebirds and the New Day. You know, there's a lot of great tag teams out there, but I put the Young Bucks for the fact that they're kind of self-made stars, and
absolutely,
and like they are. It's unusual that you think about who are your biggest names in AEW. You'd go, okay, you got Jericho, Cody, Omega,
Moxley.
And Moxley, yeah. But I'm thinking like they go back to the inception of AEW before Moxley signed. You would go with Jericho, Cody, Omega, maybe Hangman Page, but definitely the Young Bucks. And it's unusual that you would put a tag team in like that, but they are on par. Like, and they market themselves as a tag team to the point that I never really want to see them breaking up.
No, never.
I'd rather them do what they're doing now, where they have this kind of more aggressive development in this side to their characters that we're seeing on Dynamite right now. And so, but your reaction to me seeing that has now made me doubt myself, and maybe I should have put a more legendary kind of tag team. I don't know, but that's just what seemed natural to me at the time.
I just didn't expect that. I just didn't expect you to go there. I thought, it would be someone like Edge and Christian or something for you.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bucks, I've talked about the Bucks plenty on this show, and my feelings for the Bucks are pretty self-explanatory. They are the self-made stars. They are the biggest stars who have never needed to go to WWE. I said it like Kurt Angle there, WWE. I think it was 2018. They made 6 figures each, and didn't even go to WWE. You know what I mean? Like on the independents. They're megastars, and I know they use the phrase on Dynamite all the time, change the business, but they have changed the business. It's now not a necessity to be in a big company to be successful and to be a full-time wrestler, and they marketed themselves like that. And great shout. I think they totally belong in there. My list is the Hardys, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and I couldn't decide, but evidently I went with the New Day, just because of the longevity and everything. And I just think in terms of, going from obscurity to being the most over heels, to being the most over faces, to winning the WWE title, to winning the tag titles 8 times, to being their own individual characters, to doing things outside WWE, I think they're a good shout for on there. But I've also went with the Shield, but the Shield are more of a faction, I think. The New Day are a team, but the Shield are a faction. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's what I think.
It's an interesting distinction to make, and maybe that's why I feel less worked up about not having the Freebirds, or the Four Horsemen.
Technically, like the Freebirds are the biggest stars, and the Von Erichs and the Midnight Express and all that stuff. The Heart Foundation, the Rockers. Technically, they're big stars, but in terms of multimedia, cultural icons, I'm not saying the New Day are icons, but I'm just saying nowadays you look at wrestling, you think great tag teams, and I think they're one of the very first ones to come to mind would be the New Day. As an actual tag team, I don't think you get much better than the Usos, but I don't think they are like as big stars as the New Day are.
No, it's interesting. I'm surprised that you didn't have the Road Warriors. I'll say that.
That's another one. Yeah, the Road Warriors are another one that should be on the list as well. Massive stars. Okay, to round off the Mount Rushmore lists, let's do a couple of fun ones. We kind of mentioned the referees, and I said that there's 3 obvious ones, and that is Earl Hebner, Charles Robinson, Mike Chioda.
Yeah, that's my 3 as well.
But who's the 4th? I went with Scott Armstrong.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, I could pick Nick Patrick. I think what's the guy from WCW, Tommy Young.
Yeah,
he was the really famous one.
I think you're missing. Like, I've got my 4th one, and I actually thought my 4th one was pretty obvious. And it's Tim White.
Tim White. It absolutely is Tim White.
Because it's not just the fact that he had a very long career as a referee. It was also the fact that he was this important figure backstage. He was Andre's right-hand man. He had so much knowledge, and I could do without lunchtime suicides. Yeah, but
Mr. White, that's not wise.
But I love it. I love him, and I'm sad that has he passed away now, or is he still?
But no. I think he's actually a road agent for one of the top stars. Maybe Randy Orton.
Oh, cool.
He does like the signings and stuff, and he's like the guy that tells you, okay, it's your turn to go. I think
Really?
For Randy Orton, yeah, definitely access and stuff. I don't know if international tours, but definitely things like that. Yeah, which is nice to know. Nice to know he's still going about. I went with Scott Armstrong just because of the family lineage. I like the cadence of his count, and he's been in so many big matches. But then you look at the other 3. Hebner is an obvious one. Charles is the GOAT.
Yeah.
And then Chioda is so consistent,
Yeah, but Chioda is, I think, your kind of model referee now. I mean, Earl was just there for his legendary status. I kind of would like to see Earl patch it up with the WWE and get a Hall of Fame induction because he deserves it.
Absolutely. If anybody deserves it, it's him.
And he really ought to be the first. I don't think there are any referees in.
I think maybe. I think he will be the first, yeah.
He should be,
sure.
And he deserves the Hall of Fame induction and maybe to referee one more match, if nothing else.
What I used to do with the wrestling figures that had like clothes on, so say for example there was a Triple H figure that came in a suit or whatever, I would make them my referees for my matches, and I wrote on their foot, right, the initials of a referee that wrestler is now playing. So you had like the Earl Hebner wrestling figure, but then I also had like someone in a shirt. I think it was like Triple H in a shirt, and I wrote on his boot JD for Jack Doan. And then I had someone else, JC, for Jimmy Corderas. And someone else was Mike Chioda. Yeah. And they were all like the refs. I made them the refs. Also like John Cone. I think John Cone's underrated as well. And I think that Drake Wirtz, the NXT ref, is a great ref. Probably maybe the best ref in the business right now, actually.
I remember being at a house show. I know we need to was for this, but very quickly being at a house show at Braehead Arena, and I was in like the second or third row, and there were these guys in the first row who had this patter going with John Cone, and they were like, because John was doing most of the matches, it would often be the case at the house show. You'd only get one or two refs, and they were giving it always like, "Oh, come on, John, give a wave, John," and like he was totally going back and forth with these guys the whole night. It was great.
I had people in like my section chanting for him. They were going, John Con, John Con.
Brilliant.
I like him. I think he's really, really good. But yeah, there's the Mount Rushmore of referees. It's definitely Errol, Charles, Keogh, and Tim White, because that's not wise.
Excellent.
And finally, this is one that you threw out there. What about general managers and authority figures? Give me your list.
I have got Mr. McMahon, mainly for the Attitude Era kind of stuff that he did. He's had some patchy phases, but for Austin McMahon alone, for that feud alone, he deserves to be there. Eric Bischoff for Raw GM, Commissioner Foley in the early 2000s. Fourth one I dithered on, and this might be where we vary, but I've gone for William Regal's Raw GM phase in like 2006-7. 2007, I think it was. I thought he was brilliant, and I think that was cut short because I think he got suspended actually for a wellness violation. But I don't, I think he's kind of just plays it quite plain now in NXT, which is fine. But his GM of Raw stuff I thought was really good when he got King of the Ring and all of that. But
yeah,
I'm particularly confident with my other three: Bischoff, Foley, and McMahon.
I didn't include Vince because I thought it was too obvious. I thought he's not an authority figure. He's the chairman. You know what I mean? He assigns the authority figures.
Yeah,
but I guess he is the authority. He is the authority figure of the authority figures.
Yeah,
but he was never known as a GM. You know what I mean? He was always just Mr. McMahon. But I mean, in terms of someone who's in charge, he is the Mount Rushmore. It should be his face. You know what I mean? But in terms of people that were GMs or commissioners that were assigned by Vince, I've went with Bischoff for Raw GM.
Mm-hmm.
I've went with Regal for Commissioner Regal in 2001.
Why didn't I think about that?
Yeah, the Regal regime. GM in 08 and NXT.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of greatest general managers of all time for longevity and for diversity, I think it's got to be Regal as the best GM ever. I've also gone with Teddy Long for just consistency and longevity and just being great every time. And it's so funny when I was younger, and say there was a huge GM, I would consider that a shoot, because you don't know any better, So when I was maybe 8 and Vicky Guerrero was the GM of SmackDown, say for example, and then she was replaced by Teddy Long, I now liked SmackDown better because I thought SmackDown was going to be a better show because the GM is going to be fair. You know what I mean? And I love that. So I love Teddy Long, and of course the dancing and stuff.
I disagree with you so much that I'm going to fight you, but I'm not just going to fight you in any old kind of match. I'm going to fight you in a tag team match.
Tonight, you will go 1-on-1 with The Undertaker.
In a tag team match.
And my fourth choice, I had no idea. I kind of wanted to put Sheriff Stone Cold.
Yeah.
But he didn't have, it wasn't long enough. And I wanted to put Commissioner Foley, but I don't know. I just didn't. I was past that when he was the commissioner. He was a kind of 2000 commissioner.
Yeah.
And I didn't get into 2001, so I just kind of missed him. So I've gone with Stephanie as SmackDown GM in 03.
Okay.
Or 02, I guess. Because you've said this before, Stephanie McMahon was cool. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
No, she does seem like a cool boss, to be fair, when she's not firing you. But she does seem like a cool boss nowadays. But I think she was great in that period when she was trying to be the cool counterpart to Eric Bischoff, and I think she was the one that kind of brought SmackDown to life. Obviously, I know it was Heyman behind the scenes, but for the sort of poster child for who's in charge of SmackDown, I think the identity of SmackDown in 2002 was supposed to be the cool second brand. Yeah. And I think Stephanie really epitomised what it should have been. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's not just the fact that she seemed to kind of just very quickly just be established as this respectable, dignified authority figure on SmackDown, but it was the fact that, and I didn't really appreciate this until I rewatched it recently, was that it was only like 7 or 8 months before she was the most hated villain on the program. She disappears for a long time after the invasion, and then when she shows up, the first night she shows up as SmackDown GM, she's booed, and they're chanting all these derogatory, sexist things at her that they used to always do. And then they quickly get on her side because they realize that she's a babyface GM and she's tough, she takes no nonsense, and she's on the side of the good guys more often than not. And so, yeah, I think that's like a lot. She's had a few other authority runs which haven't been nearly as great. But that one I would put her on the Rushmore for sure. She still probably isn't on mine, but I can totally get behind it.
I want there to be a GM now. There's not a GM because we're supposed to be the fans asking for what we want, and they're going to give us what we want, what I really, really want. But I want a GM. I like GMs, and I want someone to be in charge. You know what I mean? It'll be more. I think, you know what? I think they should put Adam Pearce as the GM of SmackDown.
I like Adam Pearce.
You know, I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah, I mean, he's no Mike Adamle or Brad Maddox, but, I'm joking. He is, and so much more.
He's no Mike what?
Mike Adamle and Brad Maddox.
Oh, I was going to say. Oh, I forgot. I was going to be a joke. I was going to say if my fourth referee choice is going to be Brad Maddox. But yeah, I want a GM there. I don't care who it is. I guess it's Adam Pearce on SmackDown or on Raw. I don't know. Give us someone funny. I don't know. Bring back Santino. Make him the GM or something. I don't know. I think that'd be really funny. Or just someone. I don't know. I like the idea of the GM making the matches. I think it's really it makes more sense than anything. You know, there has to be a reason why Drew McIntyre is going to be defending against Orton again. You know, not just because. You know, so yeah. Make it Heyman. Make Heyman the GM. Anyway. Okay, well, there you go, ladies and gents. There is the Mount Rushmore episode. We short one this week because we got places to be, baby. Glenn, what can we expect from the episode next week?
I don't know. The usual irreverent crap, but it'll be good and I'll enjoy it.
It's good. It's good crap, or as Vince McMahon would say, it's such good shit. Right. Right. Well, that'll do us for this week, ladies and gents. Thanks very much for listening. Thank you, Glenn, for taking time out of your Glenden time.
Glenden.
And you can follow us on Twitter at WrestleConnect1 and on Instagram at WrestleConnection. And until next time, folks, thanks very much for listening. Please share your Mount Rushmores with us on social media. We can maybe read out some of them if we get some suggestions. And until then, in the meantime and in between time, stay safe. Look after yourselves and each other out there in this big, bad world, ladies and gents. Goodbye.